Not. No, I haven't gone live yet. I just kicked it off, so it hasn't quite.
There's this slim chance that there might be protesters and stuff coming in. If you do that, I prefer that you shut down the live feed.
Okay.
You get the place cleared, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if it do,
If it does, no problem. No problem. I'll go mute and I'll go to this slide.
from here and from there.
Like there could be questions from the.
Yeah, I get most of the coaches that come.
Yeah, what I'll do, I'll have it on the screen, Jill, and then Kevin's gonna pause periodically, and then if I see the questions, I'll present them to him.
Like I'm gonna play it live on my computer so I can give their concerns, you know, when I can see them and say this and that. Yeah, most of, there's about 8 of them that'll be on for me, and then there's one former coach that's coming, Coach Johnny's Coach Patrick.
Yep. We can actually.
You're ready to go.
Okay. Give me about 2 minutes here, if that's okay. All right. The 10 viewers.
Yeah, you good? You good?
Okay, in about 20 seconds here, I'm just going to transition to live. There we go.
So, good evening, everyone. Those that are present with us this evening and those that are currently online. This is our second of 3 community sessions that we've been offering. In between these 3 sessions, we've had multiple focus group conversations about what is the future facilities needs and what do we intend our school district to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, perhaps beyond. Today's conversation will be an update on some work that we've been doing over the last 8 weeks in gathering to gather feedback from you of what we've learned, and more importantly, getting comments and feedbacks of what did we miss. What are some questions that you might have about the various topics that we're going to cover. This evening, we're going to start at 5 o'clock with a conversation around the academic needs. What do our teachers need? What do the classrooms need? What are the current facilities? What are the limitations, or what are some of the strengths? And then we're going to open up a conversation as to what is the needs of our athletic program. That's going to begin at 6 o'clock. We'll spend about an hour talking about our athletic needs, both interior and exterior of the buildings. And finally, we're going to close up our third session by having a conversation around buildings and safety. What does our building condition survey tell us? What are our safety needs of the school moving forward? Specifically over the next hour around academics, we're going to present you with a summary of what we've learned. Our lead architect, Kevin Rademacher, is going to kind of give you a summary of that. We're then going to be taking some community feedback as to here's where we are, what did we miss in the existing configuration, the needs of the building, what might we have missed. And then we're going to open up the conversation about what if? What if it was determined that the district should rethink that where the students are located in the district? How might that impact the future facility needs of our organization? And then we're going to end the first hour, hopefully as time permits, to show you where perhaps some of the expansion of our existing facilities could be taken care of to meet the future needs of the school. So that's kind of an outline of where we're at. But we'll start right now with a quick summary from Kevin on what have we learned so far about our buildings, specific to academics and the needs of our schools.
Thanks, Art. All right, so this is I start with the image of the elementary building, and just to orient you, in the front of the building here, this is where the drop-off group currently is, and the rest of the building tails off to an East Proceeds wing that is adjacent to the varsity baseball field. So some of the things we've learned to date, we've gone piece by piece in the building. You see the purple areas, that's the area of focus in our previous meetings. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some of those. I'm going to exclude things like the gymnasium because that's going to be a conversation during the next step here and not get real deep into security. But sort of the instructional spaces and the areas that also support those instructional spaces. So the first thing that's up here, near the main entry, we have the cafeteria kitchen space. So what we've heard so far in all the focus groups is that it's kind of a tight area and it may be impacting how many lunches you can or cannot have, or how many students you can or cannot have in that space. So looking at expansion of that dining area at least, which would likely modify the serving and kitchen spaces. Deliveries are currently cumbersome due to the parking lot configuration. Might be a struggle sometimes getting deliveries in there, so something to take a look at. And the refrigerator or the freezer cooler spaces are something to look at as well. So I'm going to quickly review all the things in this building, and then I'll take any feedback and discuss those items and take any notes we need. Moving forward, we have a server room just across the hall, and that needs new cooling, so we have that incorporated as a future project task. We move to the core of the building here. We have the current media center. That's looking for some divided up space where we can have a maker spaces kind of shut off a little bit, but still visible through some sort of glazing in the media center space that would allow for classes to come in, work in a maker space, and then go back to their normal classroom while still being able to have a media center or library function in there. Across the hall from the media center is the nurse's office. Things that were noted, if you can't read that, are lack of quarantine area, also lack of shower, and it's generally an inefficient layout. So we take a look at what ways we could modify that, whether it needs to move or we can accommodate that in the existing square footage. Moving forward, sorry,
Kevin, we had a comment from the audience that they can't hear us with a mask, so when you're speaking, you would mind taking the mask
okay.
off, and then we'll
Sure.
put it back on if you want.
Sure. Sorry. Anyone need a review of that? Yours? All right. So, in a typical classroom space, we're seeing really across the board in most buildings that there's some inadequacy of electrical outlets. So we'll be looking to upgrade that. Also, looking at Wi-Fi coverage, so a Wi-Fi hotspots, whether that's the entire system that needs to be upgraded, that's gonna be investigated. And we'll see what that yields in terms of scope to make that better. And then there's some abandoned devices that are in the rooms that need to come out. So, in looking at that, there's likely some other pieces and parts related to a classroom reconstruction that we might want to discuss. And we can take those notes down in a second here. One of the other things that's going on is we have a lot of special ed spaces and support spaces for those. And you're seeing that in purple here, and you can see that some of the existing classrooms that were formerly classrooms are now broken up into support spaces, which really takes up usable square footage in the school itself. So you're going to see a common theme of that throughout all of these buildings, because over time, where you had a former larger capacity of student occupancy in a building has been reduced due to the special ed components and the space needs for that. So that's very common in most districts that's occurred, where, you know, the mentality is that used to support this many students, why doesn't it do that now? Also, districts are having smaller class sizes in general to provide better instruction. So that's why spaces are filling up too fast. Moving down to the front of the building, we have the entry, which we'll talk about security in a little bit. We also have the auditorium. It does not have the capacity to bring all of the students at that building in there and meet at once. The stage curtains need replacement, which need to be fire rated. It could use cooling in there, and the house lighting and rigging could use an update. Let's see. Gymnasium we'll talk about in a little bit. I think that generally covers it. For general building needs, needs a control upgrade, and that's usually where you digitally control all of your mechanical systems, and you can access that from a computer point instead of having pneumatics and things within the building. It's an efficiency thing. Almost all districts are going to that. And we're also notice outside of the building, and we can look at the site in a little bit, but there's a bus parent drop-off conflict or inefficiency. So we're going to take a look and see if there's ways that we can improve that along the way. We have some athletic fields and things like that, but that's getting outside the academic piece a little ways and into the athletic. I don't think there's anything else on here for the academic focused conversation. Hank.
So we'll open it up at this time. Have we missed anything at the elementary school that impacts the learning spaces? Are there things that you've noticed as a community, as teachers, administrators, that we haven't yet talked about for the actual classroom spaces, the instruction? Donna?
I just want to add that I talked to my faculty today in regards to this master facilities planning, and just having additional classrooms, another wing added on. If we are going with the footprint and the amount of students that we have, those jam-packed classrooms, could it be feasible to add another wing on between B and C or between B and A to be able to accommodate some smaller classrooms, like those reading and math specialists or special ed teachers, so we can open up those classrooms that are divided in half as full classrooms again.
So just for the audience, the question that was raised right now from the teachers, the faculty at the elementary school was, if the configuration stayed the way it was and our enrollments then, is the possibility of adding additional classrooms, perhaps a wing? Kevin, you want to respond to that?
Sure. The answer is basically yes. You can add space whenever you want. The effect of that on a capital project is that most likely it won't be aided the way that SED looks at it in terms of aid. So they look at the enrollment, they look at the amount of space that you have for teaching stations, and they make an assessment. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but what it will likely do if they disallow it, and we can go through that exercise, and we are discussing those types of things, that it will fall on the local share side of any capital project, which is a large dollar value to consume on the local share side. So we're always looking for aid in getting you more space, so we'll try and get creative in that.
Okay.
Can you give us, and all that you just said a lot, but 3 main points. Like I heard
Right now, we haven't discussed,
Repeat the question for those folks that are out there, the sound is a little bit wonky. There's three primary areas, we're asking, what are the three main concerns that we have for learning spaces at the elementary school? What were the top three things that you heard, Kevin?
I heard that they need improvement for technology in the classroom. The media center, making that a focal point, an area to go to and create that maker space. And, it's kind of a wash between the gymnasium and auditorium upgrades, but athletics is a little bit later. So I think that we need to get into a deeper discussion, probably within the classroom space, and really understand more improvements beyond just getting power, beyond just getting Wi-Fi. What else isn't working in there? Is it the casework? Is it the environment? Is it the furnishings that are in there? And that's another caveat that I'll say right now, is that when furniture is discussed and purchased as part of a project, it is also unaided, which is something that's just need to be planned for. So if there's a large-scale purchase of furniture, that's probably not even the greatest way to go when you have multiple grade levels. It's almost like what we've done in the past is we've created these test models for each grade level, so that you can understand, like, hey, this furniture does work, or these few pieces do not. So if we continue on that purchase line, let's exclude those and put in something else in its place. So it's a step process, but there are certainly ways that we can go just beyond the four walls, ceiling, and floor. But those can be great improvements as well, and not having a very busy space so the students can concentrate. So, and creating that flexible learning space with the furniture and using technology on the walls and being able to flip up your computer on the walls, that's a thing that's trending right now to make them more flexible. So, in the classroom space, are there any new items beyond the inadequate electrical, the Wi-Fi, and the abandoned devices that need to be removed?
Is there any other comments on the elementary school learning spaces that we should be aware of that we might have missed? Okay. Not seeing anything in the chat room, and nothing, Kevin, if you want to move on to the middle school, that'd be fine.
Sure. And you could feel free to mention any space that's not highlighted in purple. It's absolutely okay. If there's an art room that doesn't work, anything that you see on here that needs to be addressed, let us know. We'll take that down and put it into consideration for further conversation. So we are now at the middle school. So we've changed campuses. This shares the campus with the high school. Again, orient you. This is the front drop-off loop, and the fingers of the building kind of address the fields. Tennis court is off to the left here, or above the gym in this frame. So let's walk through some of the spaces again. There's a cafeteria piece here, but this is really more of an issue, I think, is that it's a cafetorium. So it's having those assembly spaces within the middle schools kind of tough, seeing that it's a shared space and cafetorium, and might not have large enough space to accommodate your music arts. So looking for a better configuration of storage there as well, because that does tie in and is adjacent to the music area, but it's really not a great presentation space. So there's been discussions on like it'd be nice to have an auditorium at the middle school. All right. And then again, we're looking at support spaces, so you'll see that on here too. So there's many functions that are in one room that might not have the capacity or the time slots allowable to have that many individuals in that room at a time. So again, we're looking for more office spaces throughout the building. There's not much left over, or there isn't any left over. So again, looking to create some more space, and physical addition is really the best way to do that. But again, it's impactful on the aid side. As we move into the media center again, it's set up very similar to the elementary building, but we're looking at a maker space in there as well. So it parallels what we were talking about over at the elementary building. As we get down the hall here, you talk about the main office and security side. That'll be the next slot. And then we're talking about FACS, Family and Consumer Sciences classroom, looking for more electrical ventilation issues are in there, and some ceiling outlets. So beyond that, we're looking at student services. Again, these are shared spaces, so both of these are highly used spaces, all three of these really, that really don't have enough space to accommodate everybody that needs to get in there. And then as you move up to the gymnasium, locker rooms, looks like they need a refresh. They're old, deteriorating, and the gymnasium itself is undersized for a middle school space because it was formerly an elementary building. So that's been kind of a conversation throughout this, is that the rooms seem to be undersized. They are very close to what SED requires as minimums, but that doesn't mean it's right size for what your needs are. So that's certainly a conversation if we were to talk about having additions, if we need to right size the classrooms that you currently have and start moving walls around, what does that do? And does it allow you to build those new teaching stations outside of the footprint of the building? Are there any questions or things that we're not hearing just yet that you'd like to add?
Any additional thoughts, things we might have missed at the middle school that has been brought to your attention specific to the learning spaces? So again, the top three things is the building was initially constructed as an elementary school. So looking at that through the lens of a middle school right now with the 7th and 8th graders in there would be something we need to have to take a closer look at. The ancillary space, the support spaces for things like guidance and special ed services, the main office, those are areas that need to be considered, as well as storage. And then I think the other big one we saw, assembly spaces. So we have a cafetorium in the building right now, but there's not a traditional auditorium that's in there. So those were things that have come up in our conversations today. Did I miss any of the primary ideas?
Yeah, I think between the gym, auditorium, and cafeteria, all three of those spaces need support.
Okay, good. No other comments from the audience or the chat? How about the high school?
All right, a lot of purple here. So, I'll start. Technology. Technology and the music classroom. So you can see that there's a dot and there's a connector here. And the logic behind that is there was discussion about possibly moving the music space behind the auditorium stage area. It's good to have that adjacency for shows and things like that. So it's under consideration, doesn't mean it's gonna happen, it was discussed. But they do need upgrades as they are if they were to stay in their current configuration. There were some complaints about the practice rooms and the music space currently being too small. Storage needs to be right sized and more efficient. And the music area is remote from the odd backstage, that's the conversation we just had. And that would allow for both spaces to be upgraded in a way. So we're always gonna be looking at adjacencies and if it makes sense to move a space somewhere else, along with the constructability and feasibility of that happening during a construction period. Let's move over to the auditorium. The laundry list consists of lights and audio control areas are currently separated. They'd like to have those in the same spot to control. Stage lighting is aged and inflexible, and they're looking to upgrade the lighting system there. Need some locked storage for equipment, so that would kind of be inherent in both the controls and then also for props. They're looking for storage space. So we could look for a spot to locate that adjacent to the auditorium. They do have a backstage stage room that may or may not be adequate. Acoustical issues, then there's HVAC issues that can be subdued a little bit with isolating the units and controlling airflow and insulating the ductwork, so we'll take a look at that. And so that involves an assessment of the entire room. So some of these auditoriums that were built long ago are not ideal acoustically, so they look like they're intentional, but sometimes they're not set up right. So we'll do an analysis of that and see if there's some clouds need to be added, or if we need to absorb sound. Also looking at what events are occurring in that auditorium, because that matters. Yep.
There's a comment in the chat group that access to the lighting area is hard to get equipment up and down, needs to be reworked in the auditorium.
Okay. Joe's taking notes, so I think I said it. Yeah. Yeah, so sometimes when we renovate these things, so in here is also the seating, old and comfortable. We usually do take a look at possibly putting the control area in the back of house here, and then that does eat up some seating capacity, but usually that's welcome to provide a proper lighting and sound control area. We'll also inherently need to make sure, if it doesn't already meet ADA requirements, to have handicap seating with co-chairs on level planes in the back. So we'll be looking at adjusting that if that's a scope item that carries forward. Let's move up, we'll skip the gym because we're gonna hit that in a second. One of the things we have discussed, I'll just share a little bit, is there is the weight room that's right out of the main entry to the auditorium. We have had discussions about possibly relocating the weight room into that auxiliary gym. And that would free up this space to be a nice gathering area for events outside of the auditorium space. So there has been that discussion, maybe creating a cafe concessions area right there. And also, as we're looking at the entire building, we're trying to create a focused core and entry point to bring people into the building, whether there's a separate events entry versus the entry that's secure and controlled during the day, and how we highlight that and put appropriate signage around the site to make that occur. So we'll skip that. We did music. These toilet rooms or locker rooms are going to be part of the athletic piece, but they need reconstruction. Here in the media center, used to be a gymnasium, has a very high ceiling in here that's really underutilized. So we look at opening this up, using the wall space behind you, because that is all exterior space. There is a room right there that we'll get some more glazing in here. And we've talked about the possibility of adding a cafe where the students could run a cafe, learn some, have like basically a business class active in the library space where students can down by it, so can teachers. There is also a possibility, we've done this with other districts before, where students work with the IT staff to fix computers, and they can have a help desk right here in the library and make this a nice, we'll call it Starbucksy type feel in the library, a place where students want to go and congregate and learn. Anything on the library?
Does that include anything with this classroom that's attached over here?
Yep, it's all highlighted on the plan of spaces we can utilize, but we'll take a look and we'll have many variations or ideas that we're going to bring to the table.
And that room right there is the white box?
Yes.
Right, or no, it's included, it's in the.
Oh, this one, yeah.
Yeah, so that, the white spot there is actually our tech office.
Right.
Right, and that
Through the wall.
was a classroom previous to being a tech office, it was a social studies classroom, so I don't know if does that change at all, or the fact that the servers are all in there, does that affect anything?
Well, it does affect stuff. So it's a matter of what we want to do. So these aren't set in stone. None of the purple lines are set in stone. So if it makes sense to take over that room, if it can be relocated somewhere else or accommodated, or it's not needed, or we can move the server somewhere, we'll do that.
Just something to beware of, I guess, is what I'm.
Yeah. So we're always looking.
So.
Yeah, we're always looking at the infrastructure, kind of, finger joining it together with the instructional fixes to make sure, like, hey, we could do this, but if we just slide this over here, it'll work a lot better for the infrastructure. So definitely something to look at. We do want to make our space in here, furniture update. A lot of the volumes are along the wall, so that leaves the open areas really flexible to do a lot of things in. We can still keep the, exterior light coming in while still creating some glazed in areas. Multi-volume spaces where you could have a 3-person meeting room or multiple of that, then a 10-person, and then even a larger classroom size space. So.
Yep. Another chat question here. Is funding aid different for special programs? Is there extra funding for special education programs? You state some items may be aided by this grant money. However, our neediest students need those separate learning spaces. Shared rooms for special education classrooms are not luxuries, they are necessities. I'm referring to the limited space at the elementary school.
Yeah, so most things are aided in buildings. Each building generates its own aid structure based off of its teaching stations that the state determines. So each building generates, let's say, 30 million in aid, and you can only use that aid once every 5 years. You can use it up, you can use a portion of it and leave the rest. But every 5 years, you have that amount of money to expend, and it could be 10 million, you know, it depends on the building size. Special ed is at a higher rate aided, but it needs to be legitimate, which is fine, and that needs to be signed off by the regional associate. So whenever we build these floor plans or rearrange things on a floor plan, we need to name everything appropriately, have the regional associate sign off on any special ed space, then that gets sent to SED, and then they assess how much aid goes to each space. So in general, if a building stays within its own boundaries of its own footprint, everything's aidable to the limit of the maximum cost allowance every 5 years. So if we're doing a major reconstruction and you exceed that maximum cost allowance, you may want to put that into 2 different projects so that you'll receive aid on it. Because otherwise, once you go past that ceiling, it'll be local share again. So we're always looking at that too.
Who's the regional associate?
For you, I'm not exactly positive for special ed.
Is that like
Sometimes
a
it's the D,
person, or is that like a district?
sometimes it's the DS. I don't know if in this case it's the DS.
Yeah, probably out of the Batavia office, there's a whole special ed service that comes out of that, so we would run our things by. And there's a lot of work that have to be done. And just for the audience to be aware, Roy-Hart gets the aidability is that I believe our last project, we received 87 cents from the state for every dollar that we spent in aid, which means the district needed to pick up the cost of 13%. So 13 cents on the dollar to a certain limit. So when we talk about this, right now, we're just in the process of figuring, what do we need to fix? What's our vision? What do we want to see happening? And then we'll have to work with our financial people and our architects to figure out what can we afford, and how do we sequence them. We're not going to be able to get the blue sky project done in 5 years. It's likely going to take us multiple projects over a 10 to 15-year process, but we'll address the immediate concerns and begin that process once we're done gathering this data. Okay?
Is that 86?
86 or 87, I think.
And that, so think of it, you have an 86% off coupon to do any, you know, basically any work within your building. So leveraging that with the local tax share is really what you're looking at, and you're responsible for the local side of that. That makes
So to
sense.
answer her question, yes, special education spaces are aided at a higher percentage.
They
Make
are.
sure that that's clear.
They are. But they just have to be counted and certified that those are the spaces, and you generally have very few of them.
So the statement from the audience here was that, yes, special education spaces will be aided up to whatever the limits and whatever's approved by the Department of Education. So they are part of the learning space.
Correct. All right, now, talking about the 1911 building. So there's a number of complicating factors in renovating this building. Some of that is, there are many level changes that are in there. If you've been in there are stairs everywhere. It's hard to adjust classroom size and the floor plate to accommodate appropriately sized rooms when you have that going on. You don't have a lot of level space to move things around, change where the corridor is. So you're sort of restricted in that mode. Usually that ends up giving you longer rooms, which is hard to see and create that learning environment and have a teaching wall that's really far away from some students. So it's really inflexible in that case of the way it's built. Some of the construction is wood. Some of the construction does have asbestos in it. So it makes it very costly to try and renovate spaces like that and buildings like that. Can be done. So whenever we're looking at that, we take an eye and we look at what would the replacement cost of something like that be. So that's where we start to get into possibly demolishing a space like that if it becomes insanely costly to try and renovate and still doesn't achieve what you're trying to get in your instructional goals. So the conversation really has been, all right, if we eliminate this, what else can we do? How do we structure this building and where do we put classrooms? So that's going to get a little bit into the conversation about a lot of the other spaces that we have in the building, especially assembly spaces like gymnasium, like auditorium. If something like that were to rise at the top as, hey, we really want a new space, we don't want to renovate what's there. Building inside of the existing footprint of a building is highly aidable because you can draw off of the aid that's for anything inside of the building footprint. So it's nice to do that. So if you can imagine, you have a gym space that you built outside of the footprint of the building that's either non-aidable or is one teaching station. One teaching station generates about $500,000 in aid. If you decide to reconstruct all of these classrooms outside of the building footprint, you get $500,000 for each classroom. So if you think of it in a square footage equation, it makes a lot more sense to build a large assembly space within the building footprint to draw off the main building and then get aid for a new addition of classrooms. So that's something we're looking at versus renovating. Otherwise, if that's not a thing and you want to renovate in here, that's why it's all highlighted purple, and we can look at how we can best address that if it's going to remain.
So we began our process of looking at our facilities, assuming that we're going to maintain the existing footprint of the district with our elementary school, our middle school, and the high school. As we've started to go through the process, many folks have been suggesting other options for the district. So maybe it's not renovating what we have, but maybe it's rethinking where our students attend and where they go. So we've had folks suggest that we leave everything as is, that you've been listening to right now, when we make a renovation and make it work. We raised the question is, what if the Learning Center was to choose to move to another location? And that creates opportunity. Or what if they wish to expand services? That's another opportunity. We've had conversations about returning this building to its original purpose, which was a junior-senior high school, grades 7 through 12. And then the question comes, well, what happens in the middle school? Well, there was a discussion about having grades 3 through 6 at the middle school location currently here in Middleport. What would that do for us? There's been conversations about conjoining the two buildings and renovating and doing things that way. And there's actually even one person suggested, what would happen if we brought the elementary school and plopped it right here on one campus at many small school districts? What might that happen? And what are the implications of every one of those moves? So initially people dismiss it, well, we'll never be able to move a building. We'll never be able to do that. Well, anything is possible, given enough time and resources to make those happen. So one of the items that seems to be getting traction right now is for us to seriously consider bringing our 7th and 8th graders into this complex, and then doing our renovation work around the thought process that we create a hub or a pod for the middle school, and then we work to improve the spaces for the high school, which then allows us to take a look at the current middle school situation and create an intermediate school. We have 4 grades there, and then to rethink, what do we do down in Gasport? If it's a primary school, then we can take care of the early learning needs of our students. We take the pressure out of that space, and perhaps we begin to lease and partner with community organizations to run a 3-year-old program. Maybe we expand our pre-K program. Maybe there's other services that we could create for our community resource, or just look to reconfigure the space. So that's been something that we've been having conversations around administratively, that we believe now is the time to have these conversations. Because if we're going to make that shift, if we're going to make that change district-wise, we really need to make sure we have that when we start to propose any sort of facilities project. So what I'll do now is just open it up to anyone that in the audience or the schools that, is there another way that we can configure this school district to improve it, to position ourselves better? So if anyone's got a question or a comment, we'd love to hear from you both in the community or here presently. Anyone? Not so quiet, kind of a shocker. We do need to have your feedback and your input, because we want our architects in a month or 6 weeks to be able to come back to us with proposals with a direction, or at least they want to limit all these ideas down to 2 or 3 options for us. So
Is that a lead idea at this point? Or is that, sorry,
That's
go
what I was
ahead.
gonna ask. No, it's okay. That's what I was gonna ask.
the intermediate concept has gained a lot of traction of the administrators of the school district. We've had conversations about what would be the positive benefits that this might bring to us. Having the same certifications in the same building allows for maximum flexibility to move folks. One of the challenges we have right now is as classes are larger or smaller, sometimes we have to have teachers walking across a parking lot because they're 7 through 12 certification versus birth through grade 6. We know right now we've got a physical problem in the middle school for the 7th and 8th graders. They're oftentimes too big for the space. Well, that can be resolved by putting them into a larger space. By moving 3rd and 4th grade out of the elementary, we resolve the capacity issues right down there, and it allows us to rethink where things are at. So this whole concept of an intermediate school is new, but it's not something that we haven't been talking about and thinking about. It helps us to create. We also have some studies going on right now that we'll be presenting to the community within the next couple of weeks about what our enrollment projections look like by grade level. And also, we've had a third party take a look at the configuration. Where is there opportunity for us to better utilize our staff? Where are there opportunities that we might want to be looking at to better serve our students both academically, socially, and emotionally? And I would open up any comments from the administrators that have been looking at this. You're welcome to do so, or any questions that we have.
The academic session, I can speak on behalf of the academic committee meeting that we had last week on, I think.
Joe, would you mind coming up here to talk to the microphone for us?
I can speak on behalf of the academics in that at the academics committee last week that I lead, it was consensus, like it was unanimous that everyone agreed that that was a really great solution to a number of problems here. One person did say, she brought up the concept of having the entire campus here at the here in Middleport, having K through 12 here because a number of districts around have that same kind of configuration. There were references to Akron being all on one campus. Star Point has an intermediate building that's a 3 through 5 building. Medina has a building that's 3 through 6. So they referenced a number of the other districts nearby that already have those kinds of configurations in place, as well as we're still waiting for Dr. Raming's study, but we anticipate that he's going to tell us that, and it seems like a parental perspective, including my own, is that, we want our kids to stay little for as long as possible. And so the longer we keep them in elementary school classrooms, almost the better. Like that nurturing center with a family feel, whereas the changing classes, it's a big transition for our 4th to 5th graders. So if they could stay in that model for a couple extra years, that was the general idea from everyone.
So there's lots of positive opportunities. The thing I want to remind the audience is that this is not something that we're just going to automatically do and all of a sudden you come in September, this is all redesigned. It takes time. We need to be able to work with our community. We need to get more feedback from our teachers, from our curriculum experts, the pros and cons cost-wise for these different types of models. Folks make their decisions for their employment based on where their workplace is. And if we begin to move certain folks 7 miles down the road, well, that might have an implication. How do we administer? How do we put the student supports in place? There's a lot of things that have to be processed, but in the big picture, we think that the intermediate model has some traction that may be worthwhile for us to consider. And that's why we're presenting it today and need to do specific focus groups with the people that this is going to be impacting. There is a question from the chat group. It asks, Medina moved grades around from the elementary and now the rooms are vacant. We need to utilize all space. So great point there. If we end up moving, and I believe the impact would be 11 classrooms done, is that correct, approximately?
Approximately,
yeah. So then the question is, what happens in those spaces? And as I mentioned earlier, it might be additional services for early learning. It might be a partner organization that would rent the space from us and provide services. It could be the Y program. It could be some of our folks from it's slipping my mind right now. Summit is always looking for space as an example. Buffalo Hearing and Speech is always looking for space. So if there was space available that we could lease to these agencies that are already providing services, but not very well here on the eastern part of the county, that might be a win-win for not only the schools, but the community and our partners. So these are all things we've got to explore and take a look at.
Yeah, I would say that that methodology also helps on the construction side, and in that the elementary building is, if it's at capacity, we don't have any more room. If some of the student population does move, that allows for those spaces to be expanded and be right-sized. So we haven't taken a look at the whole thing about how much space we could take over and what would be left over for lease, but that makes a lot of sense. Then moving that elementary population into what is now the middle school make a lot of sense, because it was formerly a middle school, and some of those spaces like the cafeteria, gymnasium are sort of right-sized for those age groups. And then if you move, what that does also is it moves middle school over to the high school, which really brings building aid units over also. So if you think about it, you know, those teaching stations are money for aid. So if you're thinking about a larger project and you're thinking about, you know, redoing a gym, right-sizing a gym, right-sizing an odd with which the music, or the middle school doesn't have really a true odd, you can now start to accomplish those, combining the forces of both the middle school and the high school student population. And then you're sort of right-sizing your district if you're doing a large classroom reconfiguration, because you'll be assessing it based off of your student population and your projections. So you won't, hopefully, you shouldn't have a huge vacancy issue, certainly not at this building, because it will be right-sized at the time you do that project.
Are there any other questions from our in-person or remote learners? Or learners, excuse me, remote participants. Yeah, Gary?
How soon after those studies are you guys able to implement, showing us the drawings for that, as far as changing the schools?
So the question is, once we come to a decision on where we're going, when we'll be able to see prints and sketches and so forth? I believe the timeline that we're working with right now is that we're hoping in the next 2 months, we will have some consensus. We've done all of our information gathering and so forth, and then we're gonna turn over the architects, and then what's the process from there, Kevin?
Yeah, so we're gonna bring to the table probably a few different options to, you know, show configuration. There's gonna be some difference in aidability on each of those options. We're gonna assess those with the construction manager. They're gonna put some pricing to that. Ultimately, before we do anything, you as a district need to know what aid each of these options will deliver. So at some point, we'll have to decide, hey, we think this is the most appropriate option, and we're gonna submit that to SED with a bunch of different paperwork that we have to do with them, and have that conversation and that sometimes negotiation where the administration and ourselves may go to Albany, sit down with them and try and understand the actual aid that they'd be willing to give for projects that we're discussing. And it might be projects, not one, but multiple projects over time to accomplish the master plan that we're all hopefully here to create. And some of that's related to aidability. So they're gonna, what they do in that scenario is they guarantee a certain amount of aid, so that we can balance that against the estimate of cost, and then you can get a true impact locally on the local tax base. So, like I said, you have your 86% off coupon, right? And we bring that back and we find the gap, and that's gonna mean some dollar value to you. So whenever you see a large dollar value, I see in most cases it's misunderstood that, well, we're paying for a $30 million project or a $60 million. Well, you're paying for 13–14% of that locally, right? Which is not insignificant, but it's not the whole thing. So the way that that's viewed later on is there's a lot of calculations done by the financial advisor assessing, you know, the tax base, and they'll put forth a number, maybe by $100,000 home. And if there is a tax impact, it'll express that in a yearly dollar value. So sometimes it's $5, sometimes it's $15, sometimes it's $0 per $100,000 home. So you can mentally understand, like, give a relationship to, we can do all this if I pay $5 for 15 years. We can do all this. Or I don't want to do that, it's $0 and maybe the scale of the project drops down. So we're always looking at that structure.
Just a question, hypothetically, we decide on something, it goes through all the approval with SED and everything,
it'll depend on the scope. So the question is, hypothetically, we come to consensus, it goes to SED, we get feedback, how long? Again, there's a lot of variables.
Go big.
If-
Just give us, go big and
If you
tell us
could,
what it would be.
if
Is it
we,
a 10-year plan? Is it a 5-year? You know what I mean? Can you get it done and can you say it can be realistically done in 8 years or shorter or longer? I'm just, people want to know that answer
Yeah.
realistically, to just get it wrapped our head around it.
it's nearly impossible to tell you the exact answer to
I don't
that.
want it exact. I want
We would probably be able to break ground on the first projects in probably 3 to 5 years. And then you know what the construction of the roofs took, the work we just did for $12.1 million took 2 summers. So realistically, by the time we get this stuff approved, we get a number, we get the board to say, okay, we're doing this, we then have to get voter approval.
Right.
Once the voter approval happens, then it all's gotta go back up, all the detailed designs and the process and all those things, that'll take another 9 months to a year likely, and then we going. Now, do you go for the big nut, which includes all this athletic fields that are gonna cost $25 million, and we're gonna add an auditorium at $15 million, and I'm just making numbers up, folks. And all of a sudden, the project's at $50 million, would the community accept something that big in one-time vote versus we're gonna go after a $15 million project and we're going to make these improvements and this and that. We're gonna get that done, then we're gonna go back out again. Or what some districts will do is they'll put out a 3-tier proposition that taxpayers, this is number one, this is the most important thing we have to do. We've got to improve our boilers and do these things and all that stuff. If you approve this, then you can vote on this one. If that's approved, then number 2 would be, now we're going to add the athletic fields to the mix, okay? You have to get 1 done and then 2, and then if you don't approve 2, then we can't do the 3. You add 3 on it, so it's a long-term commitment that the community would be making to get this kind of work done, okay? There was a question in the chat, I just want to mention here also, is there a mindset that if you split grades, it would definitely be K2, not K3, or is that still up for discussion? It's absolutely still up for discussion. There's no decisions that have been made. We've been floating ideas about the configuration. Kevin, do you want to add anything else about the life cycle of a project?
Yeah, generally, if you were to do it in one project, you'd be talking from start to finish around probably like a 5-year stint. And some of that's gonna matter, of course, on the magnitude and the amount that SED is willing to aid. So I talked about that 5-year rolling clock. If you exceed the maximum cost allowance, we may take a large project and break it up into 2 votes anyway. So you're talking maybe 5 years and 5 years, so a total of 10 years to accomplish it. In some cases, depending on what the scope of work is, if you have a large classroom wing that you can build while the school's in operation, you can work a full 18-month cycle and you're not just working in the summers. So we're always looking at that too at the same time. So usually it's, you know, you do your pre-referendum, right? This is kind of that. And there's another step of evolution of discussing with the public and understanding what you want. And then it goes, once it votes, like Hank said, it's about 9 months of design. We submit it to SED, they're the permitting agency. So they can take anywhere from 3, which is kind of where it is now, maybe, or up to 6 or 8. It depends on how busy they are, right? Just to get the permit after we submit. Then you could miss a summer just on when they get approval. So we're always trying to obviously get that in on a time frame that allows us to go to construction that next summer and so on. So usually I would think in a scale of this project, we'd be doing at least 3 summers in some areas that are full duration construction.
So just to kind of keep things in perspective, our timeline for this master planning process is that we're going to continue to gather ideas and input from the community for another month or so. Then we're going to be able to take all these concepts and put together 2 or 3 proposals that will go to the Board of Education. The Board of Education will then take a look and say, we like this one, not so much with that one, or can you make these amendments? And the board will then give direction to which these guys will then put together those final submissions, will involve our financial bond counsel, all these people that do the finance to kind of run the numbers and tell us when are we going to have our maximum aidability. In the meantime, as the taxpayers have been very kind to us, we've been able to create facilities reserve funds, capital reserve funds. So when we have a little bit of extra money at the end of a school year, we kind of use those as our savings account. And we put that money into those savings accounts so that when it comes time for us to have to build, we've got that local share done. And we don't have to go to the taxpayers and say, hey, we're gonna need you to give that $5 a year or $25, whatever it might be. So to kind of keep it in perspective, we just completed a $12.1 million capital project. And the district's contribution was 2.5, was it 3.5 million? I think we contributed $3.5 million to complete a 12.1, all the work that's been done that you've seen. So we had that said, we did not have to assess a single penny more to the taxpayers because we had thought about this over years and created that fund. We're beginning to build capital reserves for this next project so that hopefully there'll be little or no impact to the taxpayers so we can think a bit. And as Kevin's saying, so once we get through all these processes, it's a long, drawn-out thing, and I know people are impatient. I know we've been talking about the synthetic field since I've been here and probably before then, and we've been talking about the 1911 building, we've been talking about a lot of things. We're going to have a plan, and we're going to act on that plan in the course of the next year, and hopefully sooner.
And that potential, that ability to possibly fund capital reserve is another reason you might want to split projects into 2 votes, because the money has to be in there when you declare for a vote, for a referendum for the capital project. So you could take that full 3-year life cycle or 4-year period from the first vote, save up more capital reserve to vote on the next vote. So you have that money, you're banking that to help pay for the next one. And it's all a matter of ability and how much you can handle and how much you have in your current cap reserve. But that's usually why you would split into multiple capital projects. We also take a look at how much can actually be constructed in the time period we're talking about, realistically. So we're like, all right, well, we can't possibly accomplish all of this at once. Let's hold off on it because the manpower isn't there, or the person power isn't there, and save for the next project. So that's typically how it ends up occurring, because when you look at the initial local share tax impact, if there is something, it could be large if you don't have the capacity.
Are there any other questions in the audience right now regarding our academic plan and what we're looking at? Is there anything else we could try to respond to at this moment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute recess to allow our speakers to kind of catch their breath, use the restrooms, whatever. At 6 o'clock, we're going to begin our conversation around athletics. So we're going to spend the next hour talking specifically around the interior facility needs for our physical education and wellness program. We're then going to start to talk about interscholastic athletics inside the building walls, and then interscholastic athletics outside the building walls. And we're going to spend about an hour sharing you what we've learned and hearing from you what you would like to do. So we're going to start right up again at 6 o'clock.
We're gonna have JV as well. JV.
Yeah, she's out with the girl.
I can ask.
Ah, nice. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna
I'm gonna check the sound on that because there were a couple
I'm good.
see what you mean. Yeah, it looks like a. Yeah, it's just a big white glare. Because they're videotaping it.
Oh.
It's just a big white.
Oh.
Maybe you can turn them off.
I think if you maybe moved it forward. We're just talking about. We're just talking about. Oh, this is just a big white glare.
He's checking on the stuff right now.
Just thinking about if you move that this way.
Well, when Chris comes back, you can I didn't get any feedback if people couldn't see. It was a sound issue.
But how cool is that, right? So they can open this, and they, like, one of the things that.
Good, how you doing? Thanks for coming, my man. Sure. Very thanks for coming. Yeah. How are you? Good.
Chris, are they picking up a glare from the screen? What's your thought on that?
It's this camera.
If we change the lights, would the lighting went down on?
Check out the library. Should have one on TV.
Ready, Chris? Okay, folks, if we can kind of reconvene. So, for those of you that have just joined us, this evening is the second of 3 community forums that we're hosting to take a look at the future facilities needs of our school district. This is what's referred to as a facilities master plan. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to put forward a plan that will help guide the district's needs over the next 5, 10, 15 years and beyond. These processes take time, takes resources, but the most important part of this whole process is to make sure that we've got the feedback and the input from our community and from the people that are actually using these facility spaces and grounds. So we started this evening with our conversations at 5 o'clock around academic learning spaces. This hour is going to be spent about looking at our physical education and athletic complex, both our buildings and grounds. And then we're going to finish this evening with a 7 o'clock conversation around what is the current state of our buildings and the safety. What are some of those things that we know need to be improved, such as boilers and heating units and windows, those kinds of pieces. Regardless of whatever project we do, there's certain things that have a useful life, and we'll talk about that after 7 o'clock. So for the next hour, in talking about our athletics and our physical education plan, we're going to ask Kevin Rademacher, who is our lead architect for LaBella, to share the conversations and the input that we've received up to this point. We've been working on this for about 2 months right now, gathering input from different focus groups. We'll share with you what we know. And then we're going to ask if you've got any input generically about the process. What are some of the things that you're here and you'd like to advocate for to improve our buildings and grounds around athletics and physical education? And then we're going to walk through very specific conversations in our buildings and what are the curricular needs. As a PE teacher, what is it that needs to be improved in the gymnasiums at the elementary, middle, and high school? Are there things that other school districts are doing as part of their curriculum that we should be thinking about? Should we be having a room for dance, cardiovascular, weight training, those kinds of things that would happen for our students as part of their overall curriculum? We're then going to shift the conversation to our extracurricular, interscholastic athletics. What do the buildings need? Are our gymnasiums, our locker rooms, our officials' rooms, coaches' spaces, are they sufficient to do what we want our athletic programs to have? And then finally, we're going to shift to outdoors and talk about what are the outdoor facilities, what do they look like? And what are the needs that we've got to be planning for over the course of the next facilities projects? So, and if time permits between now and 5 minutes of the hour, we could share with you some images of some work that LaBella's been doing in other schools that kind of give you an idea of what it might be, based on some of the feedback you've got. So I'll turn over to Megan and Kevin. It's all yours.
All right. Good evening. I'll start taking care of the inside the building because Megan doesn't like to get involved with that, right? All right. So right now you're looking at a floor plan of the elementary building. There's not much feedback right now on the gym space. So we'd like to have an open discussion about that. But what we have heard is there's a capacity size issue at the gymnasium. What we've heard is maybe doubling the size of that would be ideal. And then there's some door issues on that. So if we're double the size, we'll certainly take care of the doors. But are there any other concerns or wants or needs over at the elementary gymnasium space? And how is that conducted during the day? How does it work or not work with instruction? Anybody?
I'll start. Overall, the size is, like you said, is very small. You can barely hold a class of maybe 22 kids, and then if you're doubling up with classes, you're looking at 40 kids in a small room of that size, classroom of that size. Lack of storage, that's elementary phys ed is huge. It's more equipment, and like in all phys ed settings, you never have enough room. So that's one thing I would stress, that there is maybe an area for that could be expanded on for elementary. If given age range K through 3, K through 2, those age groups are not really changing. You're just basically have them wearing sneakers and so forth. So locker room, that is something you could think of doing, but more I would lean towards storage in that area. We do have our elementary phys ed teacher here, Mrs. Nealon, and I asked her if she would like to chime in.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Mr. Guzman said, but,
Can you come forward and take your mask off so the audience can hear you online?
All the pressure.
We'll keep you off
I
camera.
love public speaking. The mic is right there.
The mic's
behind
right in
that
front of
camera,
Chris.
so if you just talk
You can top your mask down.
Can I sit in this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted to do like an intramural program. However, since we share the gym with BOCES, the morning is all blocked off, so there isn't really a time to do intramurals or have like an open gym for kids to come down. But if it's double in size, that'd be great, because then you can have the opportunity to do that.
And too, like utilizing the hallways for locomotor skills and fine tune, you know, using that area that, you know, different pathways and things that you can add into that just to enhance the overall welcoming of coming into the gym.
Right.
It's the kids' most, you know, specials. I hate to, it's probably the best part of the day for them, you know, so something that's going to, you know, welcome them into the gym, into a setting that they're energetic and, well, they're gonna have fun. In fact, anything too, like obviously we do have tennis courts there, but, you know, when it's nice out, anytime to utilize any outdoor space, we run a very strong field day in years past, and obviously any open area where it could be fenced, you know, more secure from the road, you know, that would be a benefit, because you're ensuring safety and so forth there. And then any type of, you know, obviously access to the playground and things like that for our kids and teachers that, you know, to make it accessible.
So, John, just to kind of summarize, the last project that we did, the gymnasium at the elementary school, folks have not been there recently, adjacent to that, we were able to create tennis courts with pickleball. We have a hard surface basketball court there, and we have a fenced-in green space for the players. So that is all being used currently as part of the PE curriculum. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we can get out there, we are out there, but.
But right now, in this type of year, we really need to expand the space internally here. Donna?
In addition to just the size of the gymnasium, it is used from 8 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. on a daily basis. I have the Y program who goes in for their physical activity in the morning. They also go in at the end of the school day. BOCES is in there every minute that we are not in there. So the wall that closes back and forth is something that definitely needs to be looked at, because we need to have that separated because of the impact of BOCES students and their program that they have. They have a lot of adaptive programs that they need to do. We have bleachers in that gym that we do not use that take up some space that could absolutely be removed and maybe be replaced with just a bench. There used to be a time when they used to hold games and stuff in there, so those bleachers were pulled out. But that is something that we have not used in the 11 years that I've been at the elementary school. We've pulled out those bleachers one time. There definitely is not enough space. We need more gym space just because we are not meeting the requirements of what our kindergarten through third graders need. Daily phys ed, 30 minutes a day. They're not getting that. They're getting it in the classrooms and doing different activities, but to have that space actually in the gym. And then our BOCES students aren't getting, they're doing phys ed in their classrooms because we just can't get them there. A larger space, storage, we need storage like you would not believe. You have little kids who need, they don't know how to share. They all need their own. It's just something that they need, and that we have a lot of things to do with our elementary students. So expanding it, making it bigger, more space, the wall needs to be fixed, and those bleachers can probably, we can work on getting those removed. But there is definitely a concern. And like you said, staging area, when they come in, they're sitting right on the gym floor, and it's impacting their program.
Any other comments on the elementary PE
I would just
space?
like to say one more thing. We have a lot of kids on medical, so we've been working with Donna to come up with like a plan what to do with these students, because it's not safe for them to be participating in the gym as a whole. So finding space to have, for them as their own space, like an aerobics or what.
Are you talking, Taylor, about adaptive PE for students, or are we talking about health needs where they can't act, or is it injuries, or what is the, when you say they're on medical, what does that mean?
I'll interject.
Okay.
I have a student right now who is failure to thrive. She cannot participate in the physical activities of the gym. So when basketballs are flying around, she gets hit in the head. That's a huge, huge safety concern. So she can't be involved in that piece of it. So we need to move her to a safe spot. Or, so when we're doing something with her, it has to be more one-on-one. And she can't have balls flying around her, turn her in the head. So having like a bike that she can ride and still be participating in physical activity and not be just sitting watching the whole program.
Good, thank you. Good?
I'd like to add something to that. Years ago, my husband and I used to run a clinic out of that elementary gym at night. If they're talking about doing intramurals, if they're talking about doing something where younger kids could compete, or I know like at the high school they have, like at the end of the day, they would have the volleyball tournaments or something like that. Those younger kids, parents are gonna wanna go watch. I agree getting rid of bleachers in there right now.
Designing stuff different.
But if you can have a bigger gym and a place for parents to watch, that would be fantastic, because little kids bring crowds.
That's true.
So thinking about extending the utilization of that to our outside community groups after the 4:30 hour would be important. Thank you for that input. Online, we have a statement about the elementary school stuff. An indoor play area would be incredible, especially living in snowy part of the country. The younger kids need large motor activities, including riding on toys. This could even be separate from PE class. So, all right. Similar concerns with the middle, any other questions you guys have for elementary? Are we good? Okay. Middle school gym, similar, John, is it anything?
Same thing, obviously, it's way too small. Obviously, outdated locker rooms, you know, something that, utilize our middle school for practices and so forth as well. You know, obviously having a gym that is suitable to hold a modified game, a volleyball game, a basketball game, that type of stuff, we can't even do that right now. That gym needs to be suitable to hold modified athletic events. And that's one thing I would really press, that you can right now, and that's something that needs to be done.
So ultimately competitive height,
Correct.
so 25 feet clear and all the
Correct.
round spaces.
So John, let me make sure it's clear. If we were to maintain that as a middle school with 7th and 8th graders, modifying that gymnasium to be able to do modified sports would be critical. If it was an intermediate school, is that gymnasium now sufficient for PE classes with modification we're talking about, or we're talking about doubling it still? Okay, is that what we're saying? And then the question would be, if we're gonna renovate this, if we created another gym space, that instead of the auxiliary gym, does the modification and the renovations on this campus include multiple competition courts? So that, I guess I'm putting that question out to you.
Well, if you're going to make it a 3-5 building, if that's a future plan, then technically we need to make that gym bigger. You're at that rate in 3 and 5 out in that age grade, you're developing units on sports-related skills that are developing to move into higher level of athletics. So I would stress that it's a much larger capacity, gym size, or finding a way to, if the number is larger students, somehow create another area of a gym for those students where you can have multiple, 2 teachers teaching in a gym setting that they can instruct the correct volleyball, basketball, floor hockey type unit at that time, and not having double classes of 40 kids in one big gym, but having that maybe option. Obviously, Dr. Stepinski, when you asked about the facilities all here, 7 through 12, yes, I would stress having, you know, a gym that is able to hold a varsity, junior varsity and modified practice, but having a gym that can hold and do another athletic event. That's one thing we do. We have one gym for everything right now.
John, I'll piggyback. I mean, I don't know how many modified games I've had to coach in that small gym, and you're trying to jam parents all through there. I've officiated games, you're tripping over people with a small gym. You need 2 dedicated spaces that are
So the needs in the PE class doesn't require us to have seating and so forth there, but we do want to be able to have multi-purpose. So I think what I'm hearing right now, and that we need to have at least 2 gymnasiums that can be used simultaneously for competition after hours, is that what I'm hearing? Is that a safe?
So I coached modified basketball in there too, and it was more like a safety concern because of wrestling that they're along the baseline and the sideline of the court. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, both sides of it.
And it's not even a regulation gym, so you're doing a disservice to the kids because they're practicing in this little space and then they get on a regulation gym and they don't know how to play. So everything they've done in practice.
And you know, kids get bigger, you need bigger space.
Yeah.
And that's how it really is.
Yep.
We need more. We need bigger environments, bigger facilities.
Okay, a couple other things on the chat room, and I'll get back to Kevin here. At the elementary school, not necessarily a bigger gym, but a separate play area, which suffices for the comment that was made. Also, another comment, after school from 3:15 to 8:30, all gym spaces is utilized at the high school and middle school for sports practices and games. JV and varsity teams spend half of their practice time in the auxiliary gym that is not regulation size for competition. And 5-6 sports are squeezed in for 40 minutes after school or pushed back until 7:30 or 8. Having a new gym will open up for the community education classes, cheerleading, etc. So, not enough space. I think that's quite clear here. All right? Do you want to move into indoor extracurricular activity?
Just real quick, I'm hearing, so 3-5, so it's intermediate school. Still want a regulation court, would be ideal to have the clearances required to have a competition or practice at scale. If it is still a middle school, that plus having seating capacity. Correct. And smaller seating capacity for the 3-5, because even in elementary, you'd like that. Okay, thank you.
So we might have a pull-off bleacher like 3 tiers as opposed to a 10-tier one at the high school. Got it. Good. All right, so high school-wise, PE, we'll start with that and then move right into interscholastic athletics. John?
Sure. PE, obviously, something with the new gym, utilizing maybe more lines, which is kind of like a catch-22, but for education-wise, as an educator, you know, having correct lines on the court for different units and so forth, I feel it's important, but not too much to overload it so that, you know, we still have our interscholastic play on.
Yeah, so primary, secondary lines.
Yep.
That's something we could fully vet. Now, when I look at this, I see the issue is that you don't have a configuration that allows it to be very flexible with the space. So a lot of the things that have come up are really probably need a new gym, especially if middle school is coming over. You have that additional capacity, then you may need 3 teaching stations or 4.
We need multiple, yeah.
3.
You'd be right. We need multiple.
So in that scenario, you know, this is just sketching out something here. So we'd be looking at possibly generating something like that where you could possibly during the day break out into 3 or whatever the capacity is that we need. You know, if it ends up being 4, that's fine as well. But you could do something like more hard wall, and then we look at really creating a nice bleacher space so that when this all opens up, your competition gym floor, again looking at the multiple lines, you could possibly have, you know, visitor and home sides, or you could have even, you know, pull out a few tiers here and have a game conducted just on that side, and then you could have the cross courts built in as well. So that's kind of the methodology of going through that. What we'll need moving forward is really, if it's just the high school, how many independent gym classes will be in there at once, and the same thing with middle schools.
What's the possible, like 2 size of gyms, like for example, like 2 multiple, like you could do a multiple volleyball games going on at one time, host a tournament where you have 2 full courts going. Mm-hmm. Is that a realistic type thing, or?
Yeah, that goes back to the conversation that we were talking about, like if this, what I just drew here, is essentially over existing building square footage. And then we're always looking at A, like I said, or if that were to get positioned over here, you're sort of on that, so you're drawing all the money towards it. Certainly, it's a more expensive space if it were to be created outside, less aid, it'd be very tough on the local tax base. But if you build it within the existing footprint, that's very highly aidable. There's certainly still a portion that's local share, but you're using your 86%, coupon on it.
So that, is that?
That's fair, I mean, I drew it out of my head. So we'll draw things at scale, and then we'll have a discussion about how big are the bleachers, how big, make sure we have right sizes, does a 3-station gym work? And then we gotta build in, locker room capacity. Does high school, middle school share locker rooms? And we just look at locker counts, what size lockers, because that's gonna determine the actual physical size of the space, how many showers.
At the last meeting, you threw out a number of putting a gym in about that space. Throw a dollar figure at that.
I don't remember what I said at the last one. Let's say 20.
That's what I kind of figured.
Yeah, so $20 million of a project falling into, if it rises to the surface as our priority, then it's gotta be in there. But we have to weigh those kinds of things and the timing again. That if in fact we're gonna drop it where the 1911 building is, well, guess what's gotta happen first? We gotta build classrooms, we gotta do those kinds of sequences. So the gym could become a reality, but it might not be until phase 2. Okay, Jill, you had something? Good, and up here.
Indoor track, and could we house that, weight room and the whole weight room program that BOCES hosts here? Could we build classrooms, like on the second story there,
We'd look at all those aspects, like if you have a locker room, of course you want that ground level. Many times you can create a physical space above there, so you want mechanical space kind of over the corridor bumping into that space, but if you can build a second story above your locker rooms, that might be a great space for wrestling if you want to keep it independent of your gym space. So we'll look at all of that, and then, classroom wing will go somewhere else. Now you have this big vacant area over here, but that's staying up while we're creating classrooms. So we really have to look at where that might go on the site too, because there's physical restrictions to the street, to the parking lot, to the athletic fields. So it might be over here that we generate that, and what's on the table is the odd on the table, is the pool on the table, and so on.
And probably my other main thing is just quality locker rooms. Equal, what's being built for one is the same for, that type, because I've been here 12 years and it's tough. You see what some of our other teams have than others, but you gotta make do what you have. But that'd be something that.
Locker room and team room, like independent.
John, talk about that for a minute. So we get past our classrooms, we're in the after hours, we're holding athletic events. When you go to the best gymnasiums that you're seeing in high schools, what are available to them? Coaches' rooms, officiating rooms?
Officials rooms, there's even like you mentioned, officials rooms where the officials are just there and they're not interacting with spectators and things like that. Williamsville has that, and Kenton, those, where they just did those. Same thing, like you mentioned about team room, team room, adequate storage area and things like that for phys ed, where it's phys ed for the instructors, the educators, and then another storage which is for our coaches that are dedicated to our kids for 12 months out.
So PE offices for the instructors, we're talking about indoor storage for all of the sports with cages and such. Separate locker rooms for PE and for athletics, or can they be multi-purpose?
I would kind of go, I would try to do 2, you know what I mean? Like, one for phys ed dedicated and then one athletic dedicated.
Most places we go have a visitor's locker room that we go to that's designated for visitors going, so you're not intruding on any space.
And if obviously if it would just be one home, and then obviously we utilize a newer, phys ed area for our opposing teams, so.
Yeah, so definitely trying to, we do that a lot, and we kind of try and merge it all together because there's plumbing and there's all sorts of things going on there. And then, of course, you have the physical locker size difference for team room versus PE. It's nice to have it in the same space so they can possibly share showers when you need to and share bathroom spaces. And then we, of course, keep the PE office in there on each side so they have direct access to the locker rooms for the PE portion of it as well. So it's nice to have those lumped in and certainly across the hall. And whatever way we configure this, we try and have that, we'll say privacy, even though it's probably going to be in a corridor. Usually it's not direct access unless we can make that occur. So that the more public side, the events entry space where the public is sort of off on another corridor.
Couple things online here. Having a new gym will open it up for community education classes, cheerleading. I suggest that we build the ability to have video and audio streaming built into every gym for tournaments. The issue pops up all the time. Placement of basketball baskets, scoreboards, strong Wi-Fi is crucial for attendees that cannot access their stuff. Spaces for coaches would be great. Our classrooms and offices become our storage rooms during our seasons. That came up in... That's what we got right now.
Yeah, it's nice because you get rid of the old tree showers and things like that take up a ton of space. There's really no minimum capacity of showers actually, but we do create the private showers. So it's a little nicer to use.
Yeah.
Meets code and takes up less space, so.
And then right now, our storage for our teams is nowhere near the gym. Like, it's relocated, like every few years. Yeah, but it would be nice to have a dedicated space for that stuff. So, like it was mentioned that in coach's space, well, it would be nice for them to have access where it's not tucked away, that they can only get to it during their season. It would be nice if they could store things in there, and then, concessions. There's not a good place for concessions. People who, it's volunteers who always work it, but if you're volunteering to work it, you're not seeing any of the game, like the way it's set up right now. And the people who sign up to work want to be at the game.
And so in summary, as we're doing any modifications for our curricular stuff, we need to be keeping in mind our athletics. We need to make sure that we've got competition areas that we can run multiple games simultaneously, either right here on this campus or minimally across the parking lot. We want to be able to have places where weekend rec programs for our developmental programs, the parents can come, they can sit in the bleachers, see their kids performing, making sure we're increasing that capacity for the day use. Thinking about auxiliary spaces for adaptive PE if necessary for our high-risk youth. Thinking about some of the other needs such as fitness centers, weight rooms, cardiovascular, perhaps running tracks, those kinds of things. If it can be worked into the master design, it would help us to anticipate. What else are you folks seeing in the future design of PE spaces and gymnasiums? Are there things that haven't been mentioned that we should be maybe planting a seed?
Well, certainly trying to take advantage of that higher volume space, which we kind of talked about, and having a walking track or running track, whatever you want to call it, up above. That does create some complexities in terms of design because of its physical interference possibly with the play area. So it's complex, not that we can't resolve it, but also in the team room, locker room, a lot of direct access to outside. Is usually wanted. Sometimes these are isolated within the building, and you obviously have, you're going outside for a lot of these sports, so having that access and adjacency is good. I've kind of laid this out here to whatever eyeball scale they have this at. It kind of fits in a nice spot over there and has a connecting corridor that runs through just inherently. So is there a preference of where the access to the fields are? Obviously the fields are down on this page. Seeing online, it's this way. So this would be coming streaming across the parking lot that's out here, or over here. But obviously that's going to involve a lot more complexity.
Yeah, I see, you bring up a good point. that's something that they would just have to deal with, you know what I mean? But our spectators, our fans, our community, I think that would be, like you mentioned, is the right thing.
Okay.
A couple of other thoughts, and it was touched on, but like, we don't host big tournaments here, because we don't have multiple courts where people can play at the same time, like in terms of volleyball or indoor. But this is also like, that's our cafeteria here at the high school, so now where does your cafeteria go? Like, is that, like, do we need to talk about that, or you just take care of that?
You don't have one anymore.
Right, we don't have cafeteria.
I mean, this could go over here, I mean, I'm not,
Right.
I'm just, and
Does
this
it
could
go over
slide
there,
through.
and I know there were years ago talk about, of connecting the two buildings. Do we
Yeah, this
create
courtyard doesn't even need to exist. I mean, we need to, I mean, there's no function really for a classroom reason. A lot of courtyards exist because classroom needs 30 feet of visual relief. That doesn't need to really be there, like, this could go here for all, you know, and that kind of might clean up the way that we think about this, so you're not affecting a lot more, but if we are to replace these classrooms anyway, cafeteria is gonna be refurbished in some way, and receiving and all of that.
So, any other concepts, things that we need to be included? They'll work their magic. One of the things that they opened up is a separate entranceway for community events, so that maybe your secure entrance for your educational programs are in this particular pod. But we know that people are coming for swimming events, we're coming for athletic events, for theater. How do we begin to look at that design to take all those functions? Does the cafeteria need to be in close proximity? Because when you have these events, sometimes you're gonna have those ceremonies, and you're gonna do those. All those kinds of pieces will be be developed. So we've talked about locker rooms, we talked about concessions, we talked about square footage in different spaces. Is there anything else on the inside of these buildings for physical education or athletics that we've missed? Taylor?
Last thing is a weight room. Like, I don't believe our weight room is open to our athletes or our students. I would see kids paying for their own membership at a gym in Lockport where they should be able to come to their home building to work out, and do whatever they want to do to buy themselves as an athlete. And I don't know if like it would be a supervisor for that or what that would look like, but even just having like the equipment for that.
Yeah, and we did hear in one of our focus groups to have that available for the community as well. Having the ability for certain times for community use, not only of the weight room, but of the swimming pool. So as we're starting to think about some of that stuff, community swim is big. Our summer swim program is big. So how do we think about some of those opportunities? There's also management components and insurance and oversight and all that, but we can work on that internally here, but as part of the design, how do we make sure those opportunities are there? Anything else?
This is not athletic specifically related, but I don't know that it would have fit in the academic, but two Saturdays from now, on February 12th, we're hosting an FFA competition, where upwards of 200 people are going to descend on our campus, and they're going to be judged on FFA, concept farming, things of that nature. We have in the last 5 years, we hosted one music festival here where all of, and you made me think of it when you said when the coaches come, like all of the music teachers were in our one music room. And we set up big long tables, and they had trouble getting on our network and all sorts of interesting things when we hosted the NISMA Wisconsin County Festival and the swing choir practice here in the library. So we don't host a lot of those, and I don't know if we don't host a lot of those because we're not an ideal facility to host a lot of those, or if we don't host a lot of those because, I don't know, but I hadn't thought about that prior to 10 minutes ago when you mentioned that. I'm like, maybe we can host more things like that if we had better facilities, to offer off to these different organizations like FFA and music festivals and things of that nature. So while it doesn't fit necessarily with athletics,
Is parking ever an issue for indoor events?
I would say that.
Are we at capacity where people can't park in the parking lots, and we max that out?
At elementary school, yes.
Right, for your public events, but what about athletic events? Do we see that in the evening on a regular basis, or?
Mainly just for like the concerts and things like that. I notice that when I come in being a parent and a coach, you know, we come in concerts or like to play, stuff like that, it really seems to get full. Athletic events, not as much.
And the location where the parking lots are for access, you don't get complaints from parents and families of the amount of walking they've gotta do to get to these, that seem to be okay.
They get the field, yes, like when my grandpa used to come watching play up at the top field there.
Little up the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot why I didn't
It's a
think
far
about the up the hill
distance,
stuff.
it's
So-
no bathroom, no bathroom,
Yeah,
So
so-
that's an issue too over at the field, we don't have a porta potty anymore.
Okay, so let's, if nothing else for the inside, any other things you guys need from the audience?
You know what, nobody said anything about the, seating in by the swimming pool. There's, that's not a great space.
Yeah, I think that was, we talked about that last time, we were having a swim meet, I think, yeah, last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the capacity for people to,
Sitting.
at the swim, yeah. So that's, add it to the list.
Are there any other updates we need in the pool? I know we did one of our capital outlay projects, we did the pool, like they retiled and they did the ceiling and they replaced the,
We just, sound system, that kind of stuff, and if we ever go to a live stream, of constantly live streaming our events, on city police, that strong Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff.
They've done everything they can do with the space.
with what they got, with the price.
Yeah, we have locker upgrades listed currently
Yep,
for
that-
locker room, individual showers. So the sound equipment's all in there, so we have that. Yeah, so I just did a quick overlay, I just kind of positioned it sort of over where the gym, weight room, locker rooms, it displaces music, so I'll give you that. And I'm ballparking some locker rooms right adjacent to the main area, and we have this kind of circulation path. And what that does is kind of taking into account possible, upper track space, and accommodates, you're gonna need to have stairwells down there, we'll probably need an elevator somewhere, and that could just be accommodated in a stairwell space. But then over the top of the lockers, possibly creating a fitness center on a second level, sort of overlooking the Recanted more or something, maybe it kind of can look out onto the athletic fields in between. So just a thought, and if we were to create a classroom wing, maybe that second level ties together better, maybe that's the way we develop and get those replacement classrooms if something else takes over the 1911 building.
So let's transition to outside.
All you, Megan.
So what have we learned so far from our focus groups? What have we heard and what's the conversation?
I think we've had many conversations about bringing all facilities to one central campus, so that leaves understanding what is going to be done down at the elementary campus, at that baseball field, and looking at that as more of a youth center of sports, because you do have those nice lights there, and they're in the parking and somewhat of the facilities that you now have for your varsity baseball. And that is a nice large space that you have. And someone did ask last time about the property extents, and because it's normally, you don't own all the way to the road, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So that is the limits of the district's property. So just kind of understanding what types of youth sports want to be done. If here at the elementary school, should the baseball move, is an understanding we need to have to help you lay that out. I did bring, U10 fields are a lot smaller than your typical field, so you can definitely lay out many more fields at U10 or U12. So just kind of understanding what your goal is at this campus helps us bring you to your goal.
One of the concepts that if we were able to be successful with all of varsity and junior varsity athletics to this campus, could we develop something down at the elementary, the gas sports site, to have multiple shorter soccer fields? Could we have multiple softball, baseball, the youth kind of things, to have that really be the developmental stuff? Like we were talking about indoor basketball for those younger grades where parents go on a Saturday, could the same thing be happening at that field? To where we can begin to really celebrate that part of it and start to develop our teams on those grass fields. That is something that was kind of brought up. But we also, I think, mentioned the need for concessions and bathrooms and those kinds of issues down at the elementary school, those are lacking. If we were not able to, or even in the short term, what about parking capacity? You get to there with a big game, there's really insufficient parking when we hold big events down there. Is there other things that came up in the focus group so far?
At the elementary school, no, the concessions, the parking, and then just looking at this as a more youth facility.
The feedback from?
Well, if they're gonna do anything there, the only thing I noticed, we've talked about a lot of times, being that close to the road, if you're coaching or trying to talk to any of the kids, you, whatever level, you can't communicate with them. I find myself screaming because all those cars are going by like crazy, so I don't know if we could move that back, any of those types of things, just so you can get more communication with the kids. It seems like it's just, you know, really loud, and then people are going by beeping, and you're trying to do stuff, and things like that.
Or does landscape help that? If we were to have trees,
Or landscape,
grab the
whatever,
sound,
somehow
Landscaping,
break the sound up a
You know,
little bit.
all that stuff would have to be done on your property, which leaves less for fields, but those are all great things. I know we have talked about putting barriers or things on that and approach the DOT, and that has been, I know.
Never easy, right?
Right, and those things you can construct on your property, but then it becomes a cost to you guys
Right.
there. You know, and to me, that should be something because of what you're doing there, and I think drawing those types of crowds, a number of people, you want to be safe, but it gives like another step to why you need that so badly, right, coming from a community, right? Not just, no, we kind of use it here and there.
Right.
You know, you start to see, we have these great facilities, but can't be used as well because we don't feel safe here.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, feedback for the fields, if they were to be maintained as soccer and baseball, are there improvements that need to take place besides what's been mentioned for at least the near term?
Talk about the lighting upgrades, and security cameras, and things, you see the field.
Is this still at, the elementary we're talking?
At Gasport, yep.
Yeah, I've coached there for over 20 years. There's no bathrooms, there's no storage. They tried to make a storage shed, but there's a huge tractor parked inside. So the storage is absolutely zero. They could use a concession stand, they could use storage, public bathrooms, none of that exists. And if you're gonna use that for youth sports, you just have to add that stuff.
Those fields need to be rolled too. They're rough. Like during the season, and before the season. That just ain't those.
So, Sarah, is it maintenance or does it need to have does the surface need to be reconditioned as part of a future facilities project? The fields, they're playable, but just need more regular maintenance?
Maintenance, yeah. Making sure
The
you're getting
drainage
grass
is
off
good,
the
the curvature, the runoff, all that stuff is fine?
I didn't know that flooding or anything anywhere.
I'm sorry, I did.
I'm sorry, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of flooding or anything, we don't have that issue down there.
No. I think it just gets like worn down like where the goalies stand. Like it's just-
You guys use that, backstop for the kickball or softball out there?
Times we just do batting practice, things like that.
But it's mostly used for the function of the
Yeah.
baseball, not necessarily for, elementary kickball or anything?
Yeah, so if this is used out here, and it looks like this is the more utilized possible game field, right? It's just a matter of, we just basically need to flatten it to a bunch of U-10 fields, or does this need to be a crown field? Does this need to be crowned? Obviously, that's the outfield of the baseball, but if baseball moves to main campus, this is just not your varsity field, but you're still gonna use it.
Okay, we're one of the few schools that do not have a JV baseball night. Most schools have a JV baseball night, we don't, so typically that space is utilized, by the JV baseball team. Or we try to swap so that we're not.
This space?
Yeah.
Okay.
On a chat group, the soccer fields need to be regularly rolled. Having both boys and girls teams playing soccer on them, the field is beat up pretty bad by the middle of the season. So that's a maintenance item that we've got to make sure that we stay on top of. Okay, anything else at the Gasport site?
We just talked about the adjacency for PE class to the outdoor space, right?
Right, it's too far for them to walk to those fields, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so whatever we do here, you want some sort of entryway space, so you're not just kind of walking into the gym. That they're muddy or wet or whatever.
That would be helpful.
Creating like a vestibule corridor to come in, okay.
Okay, this is the high school, middle school campus. Should have used more of the sheet like Kevin did. But here we've talked about, like we talked about on the other campus, bringing everything to one area, so that really is tough for baseball because it is one of the largest. If you look at it in comparison of size, anywhere you go, it takes up a very large footprint in addition to a track. We talked a little bit about orientation. The ideal orientation for baseball is north-northeast. So when you look at that, and as you know, the campus does have tiers, and there's quite a large bank along the back of the high school, and then follows the ridge along. And then, as you know, the lacrosse field up here, field hockey field, is elevated as well. We did in the last project create like an accessible path just to help that out, but I do know that that is a challenge as well. So we've looked at this a number of ways. Didn't seem to be that you minded too much that the track went east-west versus north-south, but ideally tracks would go north-south if you could. And really, campus is at a really interesting shape, and it somewhat plays to what happens with the building as well, where some of these things go. But if the existing footprint, say, if you wanted to go north-south, there really is only one spot the track fits north-south in that orientation. You don't own this strip of land here, so there's a kind of a awkward point here, and it's too narrow in this location, also too narrow here and anywhere else. So really, the only place a track ever moved, to go north-south would be there. If it stays in its orientation, it makes baseball a little difficult. Again, the pinch point of the property, the elevations, while also trying to get softball to fit becomes very difficult. So I've played this puzzle a lot.
She knows the solution.
Again, doesn't mean that you have to, but bringing everything to one campus, it is very hard to get all these things to fit. While also, I know maintaining, you do use this field quite a bit. And then understanding what, we want to do with these buildings. Some of that can fluctuate, but this really is the best way for all of that to fit if you want to bring all of your varsity sports to this facility.
Megan, can you point to the piece of property that impinges on all of that? Because there's a part we don't own?
Right in here, there's just some utility poles.
Is that not safety? Is that something that?
It doesn't really buy you anything, to be honest with you. Maybe a couple feet in here for,
Oh, okay.
It's quite narrow, it's, sorry, just here.
There is a grass practice field across from the maintenance garage that we
Right here.
currently occupy, so that could be used as a practice field.
Sorry.
To the, I guess, to your right, to your left, yeah, that's where Megan's pointing there. And then that area that you see, that little jet area, there's a right-of-way that the power company has, and FMC has that property that is kind of really odd along the edge of the the field hockey field.
So the soccer and football both be played inside the pink stadium?
That's the plan. There is, so you can, if this is turf and one giant field, you could fit that when you're not playing baseball and softball. To have it drawn up is pretty nice.
Do you?
The field
do.
on the side is a field.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Where's the field hockey?
You'll be able to play stadium.
So if this is one large
That's
piece
what-
of turf, then, this just shows the field in the middle. We can shift them, show multiple. I'm not a huge fan of doing tons of lines, but, you guys can pick however many lines you want, what size, where they go, on the turf itself, if it's turf. But making this one large facility helps you have, 3 sort of rectangles, I would call them, and then fields. I know we talked a little bit last time about where shot put and discus could go, you know, there is gonna be some tiers. You have to keep in mind some ag space and, you know, what happens with the buildings, you know, is this parking, it's all kind of gray because until the buildings get figured out, it's hard to go through walkways, pathways, safe passage, those kind of have to be done conjunctively together. But looking only at the sports facility side, this seemed to work the best. Obviously, there's no grading and things like that, so there may be retaining walls, but it has lots of benefits of creating sort of a central corridor, you know, walking to an area, whether it be a gym, you know, wherever that goes, a central meeting space, there could be bathrooms and concessions that could be shared through both. You know, kind of creating a place you want to be, a central place for all sort of athletics, is what I've seen in a lot of districts. You know, it's a community, right? Your athletic teams are a community and they want to be together. So let's make them a space to be together.
Yeah, so
You see now, that's Park in Medina,
Mm-hmm.
okay, they do an incredible job of sharing. So football's there, soccer's there, field hockey's there, softball's there, baseball's there, lacrosse is there, okay? So it, you know, you get that turf field, you can do a lot of things with a lot of sports.
Yeah, and it opens up for, you know, lots more use, you know, use you see down at the elementary school, you don't see that as much because you can get a lot more hours of play on a turf than you can on natural grass. You can get a lot on natural grass, but it does need rest, it's a living thing. We all need rest, just as grass does. So I'm not selling turf, not here to sell, but there are benefits to that on use and hours of play and variety, right, of use. If there's hard fences here, you kind of lose that whole outfield for joint use of a rectangle.
A couple of things online here. The field hockey has no lighting, no restrooms, no power. Got a comment about what about something like that's Park in Medina, football, soccer, baseball, field hockey, and graduations all in one complex. Couldn't that current field hockey field be used as a practice and put soccer and field hockey on the stadium?
Yeah, you can put 9,000 lines on a turf if you want. I just did a turf field that had 6 different sets of lines. You know, it just goes through what you want, and then you can always paint on turf. So if you wanted to add more, take away during certain seasons, or if it's not turf, you know, grass, you can paint whatever you want, So yes, those are all great things, and we'll add that to the list about the upgrades to the. But I think it's looking at sports overall and programming a little bit too, right, of what you want to do and how many you need.
Yeah, I just got a question, if it becomes a track and field now, where are we putting throwing pits for the shot put and discus?
Yeah,
Shot put and discus.
City down back,
And then your jumps are in the D
and jump
zone.
will be in the end, and then we're gonna try to do steeplechase in there too?
Yep,
So we
we
can
can do that,
get
yep, that's
invites and
true.
things like that in here?
Yep.
Okay.
I worked on Wilson schools, they have a jump area outside.
Yeah, we're familiar.
Takes up a little bit more room, which, you don't have a ton of room here. So I think you could get a little bit more bang for your buck putting them inside, just due to space, but we can always work on that.
You know, the discus, where, like, the discus and shot, where were you saying that would go?
Discus is right here. That's trying.
Oh, I see it now, I'm sorry.
And
No,
then
you're fine.
shots over here.
I mean, ideally, I'd love to keep them together. The discus has that, you know, sort of large angle, so it kind of cuts if I want to do a walkway all around. The walkways are great to kind of incorporate, so you know, you can do mile markers on if somebody wants to walk these areas around the outside. You know, your teachers at lunch, community, it adds like another level if you have some sort of grouping path. So multiple things done there.
In off hours, where all of these things be open to the community?
Is that up top? It's up
Press
here.
area, like press box, is there room still for all that good stuff?
Yeah,
So
this is
maybe
grandstands.
one big thing, that it would be on both sides,
Could you do both sides? Possibly. We'd have to look at
yeah.
spacing.
Yeah, and I
Or
just
just
did,
one main one where it'd be utilized for both this
Yep.
area and the fountain.
I just did one back to back.
Yeah.
And they had, you know,
That's
windows
what
on
I'm
both sides, so that you could call the game on the other
Yeah,
side.
that's what, oh, cool, all right.
Yep, if you like to see that, happy to take care of that.
What about a fence around the property?
Sure.
I think that would be a necessity, you know, just around the perimeter of it. I mean, I know the outfield fence would have to be portable,
Correct.
but, I think it
mostly done turf fully enclosed for just security wise. Keeping people from driving on it, damaging it if you want to lock it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
Any area that you have there for potential outdoor batting cage or things like that?
Yeah, so I have,
We kind of really set for space, like we're
no,
really limited.
you can put them down the baselines, you got some room in here. How this kind of works, you have that current building you use now. So it's, I think, rethinking, I have lots of kind of green and open spaces, but it is nice. It all somewhat depends too on grading, what we do with ag space, thinking of that. So it's, yes, I love a good batting cage. I'm doing 3 for a district in a row right now, so.
Yeah, this
It's
access,
finding the odd space, right?
Yeah.
Where it can fit.
this access road is really with the thought, you could see maybe a ghosted link if the buildings were to be joined by some of that classroom addition concept thing. So in what we're talking about tonight, we didn't really talk about that link. So you may not even need this access road if they are definitely independent buildings and your access and your lots end up being here. And then you kind of create an access coming this way, which is sort of secure on sidewalk, and then basically down, the spine of the building. And we showed that gym piece here, so you're kind of creating that attention coming down the road, like a dramatic gym space, and then that directly connects out to that athletic facility and isolates it from having traffic directly here. And we can talk about, ambulance access and things like that. But.
How about you guys?
Storage space for outside sports. Are we gonna do storage outside, or is that gonna be something that would come in? You know what I mean?
That's all up for discussion about what makes sense.
I know, like, track, you guys with soccer, with track, you got all your pads, we got all our throwing implements, so a place to put that, I know soccer, you got all your loop goals.
Quick answer is cost, because
Football too.
concessions, storage, outside, all unaidable. But if it fits into the unable side of the project, it's okay, because you're budgeting for it. So it might make more sense in the building or not, we'll have to look at the numbers.
Yeah, I show
Yeah, they're in
space
there.
for them. They don't have to be permanent,
No.
but I don't see why you wouldn't ever really use them.
How big is the space between the football or the track and the softball diamond? How big is
Between the fields. I'm doing one closer than. It's about 70 feet.
But that grandstand's within that space. If you can see, I don't know if you
You
can
have a
see the.
baseball game and a softball game going on at the same time? With this model?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, you could.
You could.
Yeah. As long as you're not both hitting dingers, the
Well,
big
they're
ones.
hitting dingers.
Just so you know.
Just make sure they're pull
That's
hitters.
big outfield, that's 370.
Oh, that's a 370.
That's a big field.
We've just lowered the home run rate.
And, we can play with that too. Yeah, they're 320 down the line, 370 down the line.
And look at one entrance into this facility, that we're
We
looking at.
would look at that and say,
Yeah.
hey, is there a ticket booth area? Like, how do you structure where people go? And a lot of that's just in the way we design it.
Is there any room for practice fields?
Usually, if it does go turf, usually practice goes on the turf anyway, because you can have so much play time on it that you can't run out of it, basically. So how you spray this out, if you're doing temporary lines,
Half a football field.
yeah, you could do multiple practices at the same time, potentially. Absolutely. And that could be an evolution of something down the road to even more intense field reconstruction as well.
There's a real big piece of property in back of that field hockey field to the railroad track. Is there any way of buying that land?
Here.
It's, unfortunately, there's a right-of-way with National Grid, they run their power lines, and the railroad has everything. We'd have to do some serious negotiations, and it's really, really been difficult for us even to work with them to maintain this stuff. We're getting a fence put in along there, and it's taken us 2 years to figure that out.
Sorry, I'll do better with my lines.
Yeah.
I forget that you,
And it's like wax, this printing
Yeah.
stuff, so you can't like draw on it. Alright, so that's all no-go zone, unfortunately.
We'll look into it further, but up to this point, we've not had any success.
and you do own this grass piece of land here.
Correct.
You go out
I noticed there was some land being developed across the street near the canal. Is that, do you know whose property that is?
Yes, we do. And, they're looking to see whether or not they can, look to sell that for developmental purposes. One of the problems, we explored the possibility of what does the district look like. The district would have to vote. Any sort of purchase that we would go after, we would have to have a community vote to approve that. One of the problems that their designers have told us is crossing a highway or any sort of school fields and properties is a big no-no, they stated. They don't like to do that. And you guys wanna comment on that at all?
Yeah, I've heard that it might be changing a little bit, but essentially that would be all unaided work. So what happens in this scenario, you're kind of in a good spot because you have two buildings. They generate maximum cost allowance, which is when I say MCA, that's what I mean. So each building generates something. And it's sort of an 80-20 split. 80% of that is for construction in the buildings, 20% of that is for work outside of the buildings. So because you're on a contiguous campus, you can spend that money from both buildings on the whole campus. But go across the street, currently, it's kind of a no. But we've heard that there's some laws that are kind of changing to allow you to cross a public way like that and
I'm
still
just
get.
trying to think outside the box to get us more
It
space.
would be nice.
Yeah, I,
One last question before you. Lighting, how is it difficult with putting, you know, lights in these facilities? Are we?
It's really not hard anymore because of LED and the way that they can do the photometrics and control where the light heads are going. So for whatever sport you're playing, different heads on this, even on the same poles, can be giving you the appropriate photometrics for the sport you're playing, if you're on a multi-purpose. It's really easy for this field,
Yeah.
straightforward. And this gets you in the right orientation, so no one's looking into the sun for competition. Even the, you know, the grandstands are facing away from the sun when you're gonna have the competitions anyway. And then, of course, night games, it doesn't matter.
Okay? Anything else athletics? Have we missed anything to be in the mix?
Anything, Jim?
Okay?
Megan?
All right, let's take a 5-minute recess and then we're gonna finish our conversations around, building condition survey and talk a little bit about 1911 and safety. when you're ready, Chris. Okay, so once again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our second of 3 community forums. So far this evening, we've spent some time talking about our academic spaces and potential configurations for the district. We've just finished a conversation around athletics, physical education, and wellness for our schools. And our final time together here is going to be talking a little bit about where we are about assessing our safety in our schools. Right now, what are some of the things that have been brought to our attention? Some of the preliminary information we're gathering from what's called a building condition survey that was completed in 2015. There's some items that we've been taking a look at. Also going to touch base on some of the initial work that we've been doing around the 1911 building, which has been here for a long time. And those are some critical things that we need to be taking a look at. We want to bring new, we want to be doing renovations and improvements to our school districts, but we also have to make sure that we're taking care of the physical plant. There's many things that have a useful life to them, such as our boilers, our roofs, our windows, and all those things need to be considered in any project that we do. It's not exciting necessarily, but it's essential to the function of maintaining the health and safety of our kids. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Kevin and Joe once again to kind of give you a summary of what we've learned about safety issues that have been identified around the district, and then start to talk about some of these infrastructure items. Kevin?
All right. So we're going to run through all 3 buildings. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions at any time. We're going to go through some of the findings of BCS and then the security piece. So Joe might jump on some things as I speak, but general building issues that we've heard from the community are we have some incomplete exterior lighting that needs to be upgraded, and that will become inherent in any site work we do if we're involved in the parking lot or bus drop-off loop. Camera coverage enhancement is a want, and then some perimeter fencing or coverage over the playgrounds and fields is a want there as well. There's HVAC building controls upgrade. That's usually DVC control, direct digital control of the mechanical systems, eliminating the pneumatic. Upgrade, like I spoke about before, is the bus drop-off and parent pickup loops, and trying to isolate those and make them a little safer. Protective guardrail fence around the athletic field we've talked about. We've talked to the DOT. That's not really a thing that they will do, so if it's anything that can be done, it would likely need to be on the district site. Cost to the district. We have recently, as of tonight, discussed having some sort of sound barrier by some plantings possibly to control the sound coming off that road for instruction in those fields. We also talked about the secure entry. So the secure entry, if you don't know it very well, it's right here. You actually come through the vestibule and you walk right into where the auditorium is. Some of the new way of controlling entry and having meetings with parents in buildings is to allow for that secure entry to obviously be secure, but also allow them into a joint office space which has a possible conference room, conference center, where a teacher can come from within the building into that secure area. The parent or whoever's visiting can come in the secure vestibule and be led into this second layer of security, which is that office space, and never really get into the school building proper. You know, some of the control is lost once an individual gets past that security barrier. So trying to create that multiple level of security, keep it away from the auditorium, which is a large assembly space. So we have some options we're looking at to control that. Fire alarm and phone upgrades we're also looking at. Sometimes that's a integrated upgrade along with the PA system, so we'll offer those ideas up and see where that lands, but there's a lot of options out there that ties in the security piece with simple PA function, lighting indicating lockdown, lockout, things like that are kind of the new way of controlling all of that function in the building. And then central door access control. You may have heard of classroom lock function. functions where you can have a key lock function from within the room, there's thumb latch options, there's also electronic control of those doors that can be done. So we'll see what works out there, whether it's fully electronic or more manual. That gives you another layer of security. So we talked about cameras, doors, and then a single point of entry that's secure also. All layers of the security function.
May I say something?
Go ahead.
In reference to the security of the buildings, being able to know when a door is open, like, in the main office, okay, a wing door was open, okay, I know kids are going out to the playground, I know when it's open, it closes moments later. But if the door is propped open, we have some kind of signal or alert. And then, in an emergency situation, I know people call it panic buttons, but have a button to disengage every access of every door, so nobody can use fobs or anything to get in, because right now, all our teachers have fobs to get in. I have a key to get into every door in the building, but not every teacher has that. And if a teacher was overpowered by somebody and being able to engage that, and nobody can enter the building. In reference to security and central things, right now I got alarms in the vestibule, I got alarms in the office, I got alarms in my office. Being able to figure out which one is going off, and I don't hear the one out in the vestibule, but I can hear the ones in the office, and it just, there's a lot of just having a central location for some of that of what's going on. And then just the main entrance in reference to the, I don't know if you want to call it the strength of the glass that's being used as an entry to the building. Right now, my secretary's window faces the outside. If they can't get the front doors, they're going to breach her window. And what are we doing to strengthen that and making sure that those central points are not easily broken into? Yes, there's air conditioning units in my window and secretary, those are easily removable. They can get in there at any time they want, if they really try. Nobody listening, please don't try that. But there's always, you know, you're worried about the ingress and the egress of the building all the time and how people can get in. Being able to know that a door is open is huge. Because if I don't know the reason why, I'm gonna go find out. So.
Yeah. Okay, I think I got it all. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we do in here have relocate and centralize all alarm notification devices to the office, and the central door access control and alert function. So the way to alert is simply a door contact. We do this all the time. I'll say that sometimes it becomes such a nuisance that people turn it off. So that's not mine to do, but yeah, a door contact is an easy thing. It can all be centralized, you can know what door is going off. You can easily also tie that door to a camera. So if a door is opened at a certain point, the camera can record a certain timeline before and after. That, all those settings can be controlled electronically. You spoke about the IDs and proximity readers. Those can, based off of the setup of the function, which you can program almost anything, that they will not work in an event of a lockdown if that's the device that's used to access certain areas, outdoor or indoor. So there's a lot of different levels to that. So that's where there's discussions about whether it's a physical key or a prox, and how do you want that to function in certain situations. So it's sort of infinitely programmable.
Right.
When it's in the whole system though, that's the thing is, it could be a partial fix. So we'd have to talk about the overall upgrade to get to where you want to get.
And when I talk about that, I mean across the district, not just the elementary school, because it does apply to the middle school and high school. So, you know, those are always concerns.
Mm-hmm.
How many times does somebody prop a door open and you don't know it and who's walking in?
Oh, you spoke about the windows too, yeah. So usually when we create secure entry vestibules, we do create in the access window where you're talking with someone, there's a ballistic grade.
Yeah.
And now I can't say bulletproof, it's a ballistic grade. So,
Okay.
so whatever level, you know, there are physical barriers that you can put on existing glass where it'll slow anyone down. So there's films that can go on existing glass, or the glass can be replaced in certain spots, whether that's in the vestibule or direct access to someone that's checking credentials in the secure vestibule. Any comments specific to elementary? Nope. All right. So middle school was originally an elementary school, if you don't know. The room sizes often feel too small. Hallways are narrow, no auditorium, which is more of a physical space need. Door security monitoring, camera upgrades, obviously the conversation we just had, we're gonna parallel that across the buildings, it only makes sense. Same thing with any remaining controls that don't make sense for direct digital control of mechanical systems. That's a constant upgraded thing that we would look to do in every project if we can't do it in one. Storage space increases are common across the district, and in really every district we ever work in, that's always a problem. State doesn't aid storage, so it always gets left behind. Same thing with mechanical space, they don't need that, so fun times. That's why you have so many things on the roof. Incomplete exterior lighting, obviously camera coverage, and then just safety in general with having that lighting outside, and that ties into the bigger picture of what we might do athletically and just for public ways to have those lit outside to get out to those fields. We'll work on taking care of that. Wheelchair bus drop-off was a problem here, and I'm not totally up on what that is, but.
So
Joe?
instead of being dropped off in the bus loop, people are brought to a side gym door on the new emergency access road that we just built. So there is a wheelchair accessible spot there, but it's less than ideal, being at, the extreme end of the building, separate from everyone else.
So in any secure entry redo, we'd look to obviously make that accessible and again, have that control with parent meeting rooms and things like that, and figure out where we can move other physical space if we need more direct access to outside, and also maintain visual control of the drop-off rooms. Anything else, Jim?
I guess some of the other unique things about this is that we continue moisture concern, especially in the B wing. We think a lot of that has to do with site drainage issues, which I believe we partially looked at. Yeah, so, and that's a very, that was just completed last summer, right? But obviously continue to, monitor that and try to fully understand what the source of the moisture is there. Also, the exiting at the end of that wing is right abruptly against a steep slope, so it's, students tend to congregate there instead of getting away from the building. There's some, overhead power issues in the FACS and science rooms, which we'd love to get away from.
What about handicap access?
For-
For entrance to the building, like, if you see that at the elementary school, we got a metal ramp and that curve is pretty sharp. We have a girl in a wheelchair at the middle school right now, and if there was an emergency situation, it's difficult to get her, making sure she gets where she needs to be, but having that accessibility,
Yeah, so in the entry vestibules, both at the elementary and here, we know the ramp you're talking about, been on it. We would try and incorporate that right at the main entry, and we really, what that actually means, I don't know yet, what that would look like, but you try and keep that ramping or lift or whatever it means inside of the building, so you're not dealing with shoveling or any kind of inclement weather. SED has been kind when adjusting secure entry vestibules in terms of aid. That's kind of like your one give on an addition that still receives aid without having to have like a teaching station. So we've done that before. Joe has recently done a lot of them. So that's where we would incorporate that feature. Anything else at the middle school? Any comments on that? All right.
Just for a public service announcement, we, at this moment, we will not be closing tomorrow morning, as with most of the schools in this area. There will be some closures on the western part of the county, so I'm sorry, folks, but things change dramatically. Tomorrow morning, you may be getting a call.
So, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was gonna, so I guess, again, some similar comments at the high school regarding, camera coverage, exterior lighting, coverage of fields and things like that. Similar comments would apply to the secure entry. It's a little more challenging here in that there's like a main entry in front, which is remote from the office. So would we have to create like a sort of a pod out here to handle entry, or possibly think about different entry locations, or moving some off, moving, just having a space for a room right off the entry, which is kind of challenging here. Let's see what else. And we kind of talked about some of the stuff in 1911 at the 5 o'clock meeting, but there are a lot of, there's some less than desirable accessibility conditions. The ramps are a little bit too steep. There's just like a lot of level changes with stairs. So that, the path for, someone in a wheelchair can get kind of circuitous. Let's see, there's like comfort issues especially in this 1911 building. I have a photograph, I was just walking through a room today and there was like a handwritten note about, please do not raise the blinds, it gets, because of the unbearable sun in the morning or something. So, and that was like, somebody took the time to write that because they've had issues ongoing. There are a lot of windows that are difficult to open. Some rescue windows I couldn't even open with, trying to lift with both hands. There are other just egress, like exiting issues in general in the building that, it's difficult to improve upon at this point.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things is that we're looking at it both ways of how much money it would take to improve this space to be a nice, usable space versus what it would take to replace the space physically within the building. So there's so many things listed here, and probably not even listed. But we're gonna come to the finish line at some point and understand what the dollar value is relative to a new build, and that's gonna yield kind of a direction. It's gonna either make sense or it's not gonna make sense, or it's gonna be so close, it's an easy call to go with the new construction that's gonna be right-sized, have the right building envelope, be efficient, and instructionally just correct for the
How
district.
close are we to knowing what that break point is?
We're working on that through the month of February with our construction manager. We're hoping to have some findings at the end of the month that would offer like a real comparison of what this takes. And some of those things are like tangible and correctable things, and some of them were like, we'd just be still living with a condition that we don't want, because you can't really change the proportion of the classrooms. You're not gonna improve those sight lines, no matter how much you change the finishes.
Can the internal be just like, can the facade stay? Like, so that like you said, the imprint, it stays, but or do you demolish the whole thing, you build a new facade to mirror the old facade? I don't know how that works.
Ideally, you would not want to try and retain it because of the expense. Also, with a lot of the level changes, if you were to build new, your floor-to-floor heights would be different to accommodate. Really, if you talk about heat, and you talk about the potential in the future to even have the possibility of providing AC, it's much more complex when your rooms are individually controlled. So you kind of want that interstitial space, floor-to-floor, above ceiling, to allow for ductwork. So in the future, in the section of the air handling unit, maybe you can add cooling in the future. So it's definitely cumbersome to try and retain some of that facade. Obviously, can it stand up? We don't really know. Some of it's wood supported, so there'd be a lot of temporary costs just to retain it. So We have to deal with SHPO, State Office of Historic Preservation, so they're gonna have some say in what we can mimic even.
So we've actually reached out to them already and had, like, this has been evaluated in the past, this 1911 portion, and it has been judged to be non-contributing, or whatever the term is, to the state of New York. I think part of it is because, I mean, if you look at it now, you know, there's that metal band there's that band at the top of the building. I think that used to probably be like a stone cornice. That was all removed. You know, a lot of the other, it's not just one building, it's been added on to, you know, over 3 or 4 iterations. I think they view it as, it's not really, there's been so much that's been done to it that it, like, yes, you could restore it, but they don't really, they're not pushing for it.
So it's not historic.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, if you've already replaced the windows, like the cornice came off, they don't think there's any architectural significance, which is a good thing for you, because, because otherwise they make you spend insane money to mimic what was there, yeah.
We're actually kind of relieved that that was their view of it.
So in that case, we have a design opportunity if we wanna keep the same feel in a way. You know, whether it's classrooms or whether it's even a gymnasium that has that, you know, presence.
And I guess I asked that because I heard at one of the very first meetings we had, I think it was a board work session, I heard a few of the board members who went to school here, you know, back in the 70s say, you know, it'd be cool to keep the, like, nobody really cares about the stairwells, but like to keep the actual structure so that you don't lose that feel. Like everybody was heartbroken when they cut down all of our trees, you know, with the, so to keep that sense of what it is. However, nobody really cares that the classrooms are from 1960. Redo the classrooms, please, like, got it, but, you know. I guess that's what I remember hearing, and if I'm wrong, you were like, Earl and Dave, they were, I don't need to go take a tour, like, I lived it, like, but they liked the idea, I think Tommy was the one who liked the idea of keeping that feel of that.
I won't say outright that we won't look at it, you know, we'll see if there's some opportunity there. You know, sometimes it's nice to have that interface of new and old. Some of the problem is that interface usually you wanna see from a new interior space, and you're really close to the road on the facade that you probably wanna keep. So, but we'll take a look at it. Or retaining some pieces of it and incorporating it, and then, I mean, any of that could be.
Did Jeff say that there's no place out there that says Royalton-Hartland Central School District anymore or something? Remember, who said, somebody said it.
Like a piece of stone.
Like a, yeah, like a.
Well, we'll go through all of that and see if something salvageable like that would be great to, yeah. We wouldn't just be like, throw that in the dumpster.
No, but I don't think there is one, and I think they wanted there to be one.
Okay.
You know, like, I don't have the notes, but this is what's coming to mind.
And then we talked a lot, I mean, you see a lot of purple on this page, but there's a lot of woes in a lot of different places here. You know, whether it's finishes, poor, you know, physical space layout that doesn't work anymore with the way that you instruct, or even this library, you know, it's not made for the current way that libraries are used, and it's not a terribly exciting space anymore to be in. So that's the things we'd be looking to do to really drive students to spaces like this. Much better athletic facilities are wanted from what we've heard. So in terms of general upgrades, you know, of course, we've heard the security piece, it's common theme here as well. But if we're able to do new space, that really ups the ante on what we can do with the environment, with mechanical systems and things like that. It's gonna be a much more comfortable space due to new code requirements. Just in that, it's gonna be a huge difference.
Anything else on general facilities and safety? Are there any questions? So, as we walk away from today's community input, and appreciate everyone that took the time online and in person to give us some more information. Our next steps in the process is that we're waiting for a study on our enrollment and our staffing patterns and possible configuration. We expect to be seeing that in the next couple of weeks. We'll be hosting additional smaller focus groups to kind of dig deeper on some of these concepts. The team will start to take these ideas and come up with a couple of general ideas of what we might be able to move forward. We'll be briefing the board in a couple, 3 weeks, I believe, let them know where we're at the process, and then we'll be bringing those ideas back and forth. There's gonna be some give and take, and we'll throw some concepts, and we'll get feedback from the community and from our staff. If anyone is interested in providing additional feedback, feel free to contact me or any of your building principals. If you'd like to be able to host some sort of a conversation at the buildings, just let us know, and we can do a virtual meeting, or perhaps in person. We want to get as much feedback as possible at this phase. We will get to a point that it'll be a point of no return, because we're gonna have to start investing significant time in the design and the work, and it's gonna be going to the board. So now is the time. If you've got strong opposition or strong support, please let us know. Very, very important. With that said, I'd say, have a good evening, drive carefully, and we'll see you all tomorrow.